I didn't step into education because I had a perfect experience. I stepped in because I didn't have a perfect experience.
That is Jayme Braida, principal of Columbus Elementary and Iowa's 2025 Elementary Principal of the Year. Her leadership identity was shaped long before she ever stepped into a classroom, built from a childhood where a few adults changed her life through belief, connection, and compassion.
Some people saw some things in me. They capitalized on that excitement and sought me out for some professional development and just got me really excited about leadership. And I've been trying to make an impact ever since.
Her journey shows how resilience grows when opportunity meets potential. She stepped into leadership by driving innovation, serving others, and aiming to make an impact beyond her own classroom.
And every setback I have viewed as an opportunity. Instead of seeing it as I'm a victim, there's no way I can recover from this, we face those things head on and we reframe them as more of an opportunity to grow, to learn, to become stronger. And that's part of that, having that optimistic mindset.
Today, we'll explore how Jayme reframes adversity, strengthens her leadership identity, and builds resilience that spreads through an entire school community. By the end of this conversation, you'll learn how purposeful reflection, healthy mindsets, and relational leadership create cultures where both adults and students can thrive. I'm Dr. Matthew Flippen, and this is Transformational Educators. Jayme, it is a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, it's really great. I've been a fan of yours from a distance for a while, so it's so great for us to get some time together. You are just making such an impact of being an encourager for so many. So let's back up and tell us a little bit about your personal journey into education, how some of the early experiences shaped your leadership identity.
Sure. So I didn't step into education because I had a perfect experience. As a matter of fact, I stepped in because I didn't have a perfect experience. I was the kid who was full of a lot of potential. Really, academically, school came very easy for me, but I was very misunderstood. I struggled with attention, with anxiety, with just weight from trauma that was happening. And no one really knew about that because I showed up and kind of looked the part, like fit in with the right crowd. I was in the different activities. But there was a lot going on. And there were a few adults that did take notice. And through their belief in me, the way they formed relationships and connections, and their beliefs and behavior, they were really able to change my entire trajectory. My leadership identity, I think, was formed long before I ever became a teacher. And I see how throughout my story, my purpose has always been the same. And it's to really make every child feel seen, heard, and valued. So I know what it's like to be overlooked, but I also know what it's like to be believed in. And so that dual experience, I just carry into every role that I've ever held.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Jayme. You know, people still say, Matthew, you're full of potential. And I'm thinking, I'm not sure that's a compliment at my stage, but I totally get that. Jayme, when I was in high school, my parents went through a divorce and my family was relatively known. So it was incredibly hard. Right. I mean, I was trying to hold it together, be an athlete, perform, be a good person. But inside, oh, man, it was just so hard. So I can't relate fully to your story, but I know that there are hard things that we go through that can shape us for sure. Did you go straight from college into teaching?
I did. It took me a while. I was a 7-year senior. I don't know what you call that anymore. Yeah, I think sometimes when you grow up with some different, generational trauma, generational poverty, it seems like some of those things follow you into life. And so I did make a lot of mistakes and do some things that I wasn't proud of when I kind of was in my college years. And I ended up getting pregnant and got married and had a son. So I was in and out. I kind of dropped out of college and went back to college. So it took me a while. And then I became a teacher. It wasn't until my junior year that I declared a major, and I kind of fell into it. But all along the way, like I was saying, it's just like doors have been opened, things have occurred that really has shown me that this is God's plan for me, and I've been able to just live into my purpose throughout everything.
That's so awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Jayme. Yeah. So was there a time when you remember early in your teaching career that you thought, or someone maybe spoke into you, that you're not just a teacher, that you could be a leader that impacts culture or do more?
So if we go way back, when I was in college and I was about 8 months pregnant, I had a professor that I was unmarried and I was at a very Christian college, and there was some shame that I think came along with that. And so this professor actually went out of her way to pray with me, and she would leave little snacks on my table. She just went above and beyond. She had been a school principal, and so she was teaching our education classes. And I remember thinking, and she came to the hospital when my son was born. I remember thinking to myself, I want to be a principal just like her. I'm sure she was amazing. It's funny because the two people that really shaped me were my fifth grade teacher and my professor, and became a fifth grade teacher and a principal. But truly, when I was right in my first year of teaching, I think some people saw some things in me. I was doing a lot of innovative things with technology and sharing things and just so excited. And they kind of capitalized on that excitement and sought me out for some professional development. So I started leading professional development in the district around technology. That's when I actually started my blog that you and I had talked about. And they also afforded me some opportunities to be on leadership committees and teams. So that was really awesome to be able to have that platform early on, and just got me really excited about leadership. And I've been trying to make an impact ever since. So I've always felt like no matter what role I've been in, whether it be a classroom teacher, an instructional coach, I've always tried to have a bigger impact than what you would think. So just trying to get beyond my classroom, get beyond the walls of my school, as you can see now, just trying to branch out. And I think one of my core values is making a difference. And so the more I can make a difference, the more I'm just getting my bucket filled all the time. So
how do you stay anchored in that particular core value?
That's the thing. I talk a lot about my values, how I try to reflect constantly to make sure that my actions are aligning with my core values. If I'm leading with integrity and trying to prioritize what's important, and I'm making sure that I'm aligned with my values, it's not hard to make that difference.
Yes. Yeah. So. Yeah. I mean, we definitely see that transformational leaders have high self-awareness and this practice of self-reflection. Am I aligned? What kind of feedback am I getting? Am I open to feedback from my team and the people around me? It sounds like you're getting a lot of positive reinforcement because you do give so much, and you are very, very positive. Also, too, don't want to miss the fact that I probably think that, I don't know if you would say this, but that grace is one of your core values. I mean, it sounds like you needed some grace. You needed to feel that. You know, grace is a gift we don't necessarily deserve, but we want. And it's part of the reason we've worked it into our name, right? Grace Lynn, which means abundant grace. Lots of people in education, children in our classrooms need it.
I know that when I went through my own divorce a few years ago, I was struggling tremendously just to get through that personally. And so coming to work was hard. And I did show up. I think I showed up fairly well for my staff during that time, but I was constantly asking them, just please give me grace, please give me grace. And so over time, grace did definitely become a core value of mine when I needed it the most. And so sometimes you don't know that that's something you value until something impacts you. And funny that we're having this conversation because last night I had a staff meeting and we actually did an activity where we circled our 10 core values and then narrowed it down to our top 3. And we talked about how our values change, but we also talked about when we understand each other's values and situations or conflicts arise, if we can pause and think about where they're coming from and what they value, it helps us to respond in a way that shows grace and empathy, but accountability at the same time.
Yes, exactly. There's a balance there for sure. And you can. And we see that the great leaders, they absolutely give grace and they still strive for excellence. And you can do both.
And so sometimes you don't know that that's something you value until something impacts you. And funny that we're having this conversation because last night I had a staff meeting and we actually did an activity where we circled our 10 core values and then narrowed it down to our top 3. And we talked about how our values change, but we also talked about when we understand each other's values and situations or conflicts arise, if we can pause and think about where they're coming from and what they value, it helps us to respond in a way that shows grace and empathy, but accountability at the same time.
Yes, exactly. There's a balance there for sure. And you can. And we see that the great leaders, they absolutely give grace and they still strive for excellence. And you can do both.
Hey, thanks for joining us today. One of the things I love about these conversations is how they remind us your work in education matters, and your commitment to growth can ripple out to change entire communities. At Graceland University, we support educators on that journey through degree programs and partnerships rooted in purpose, not just credentials. For more information, see the QR code on screen or follow the link in the show notes. Now back to the episode.
Now, you mentioned this activity. Are there other systems, support systems that you've built in to the campus culture there?
So we are Capturing Kids' Hearts School. We're actually Capturing Kids' Hearts District. It really is a program. It's a philosophy. It's all the things. It comes down to how we treat each other and the intentionality behind that. And so there's a lot of practices with Capturing Kids' Hearts that we really follow with fidelity. And those things are things like greetings and affirmations. And it's not just about what we do for kids in our classrooms. It's about how we treat each other as a staff. And so it's truly built into the culture. This whole idea of you can't have a kid's head before you have their hearts. Well, it's very true for adults as well. And so you will just feel that if you were to come into the building, you feel this positivity, this connection, this sense of belonging. And really, it bottom line comes down to how we treat each other, and we're going to treat each other with kindness and respect. And so I can do lots of morale boosters. I can do food days and fun things, but really those things don't change culture. They don't create that sense of belonging in community. It's really through intentional leadership actions, building in those routines, habits, practices that become part of the norm. And then, of course, holding people to that and being accountable. And then we do have once a month, we had a Wednesday where our staff focus on some Capturing Kids' Hearts kind of topics. Okay. And we also are reading the book. Several of us are reading the book Onward by Elena Aguilar. Okay. I think you've heard of it. Her book is about fostering emotional resilience in adults. And so we're really learning together, how do we become more resilient adults so that we can not only interact well with one another and battle that stress, but also how we show up well for our kids.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, that those processes that you mentioned are heavily supported by neuroscience right now. Yeah, if we're going to use science-based, research-backed practices, starting with relationships, trust, building healthy relationships is core for adults, strong culture, for kids to learn. Yeah, that is so true. Love to hear that you're doing that. So is there a time where that was tested, where your leadership has been tested? What happened? How did you deal with that?
I think adversity has kind of been somewhat of a constant in my life. Principals, especially, we face adversity all the time. So, obviously I went through things like my divorce. I led through COVID. Those are all huge things that challenged me. They challenged my leadership. But again, every setback I have viewed as an opportunity. And I think good leaders who are able to be resilient, they're able to reframe events that happen to them. So instead of seeing it as I'm a victim, there's no way I can recover from this, we face those things head on with strategy, and we reframe them as more of an opportunity to grow, to learn, to become stronger. And that's part of that, having that optimistic mindset. I constantly take a problem and I'm already thinking about, oh my gosh, this is kind of a good thing because we're going to grow from this. We're going to become stronger. Every day's not great all the time.
But we can learn.
We can learn, and perspective is powerful. One other thing too, I know we talked about this as well. I am just rooted in faith. And so I actually want to I'm writing a book right now. I just sent it off to the editor because it's pretty much done. But I want to write another book. I really do. I've been thinking about this, so I hope nobody steals my idea here. But I want to write about some people in the Bible. I want to write about James. James reminds us that trials produce perseverance. I want to write about the Apostle Paul. He's content in all circumstances. So deep purpose and resilience really comes from living through hardships and leaning on faith. And when we can anchor ourselves in purpose and cultivate that resilience, we can truly find contentment and joy in our work. So I'm constantly thinking about that, and also going back to proof of all the times in my life where I have made it through with God's grace and become stronger.
Yeah, I love that. I can't wait to read both of those books. No,
Now I said it out loud, I have to follow through with it.
That's right. You've spoken it into existence. So I heard somebody the other day, and then this theme kind of just started popping up. I heard people just repeat it over and over again. So it must have been a lesson I needed to hear. But it was about the mountains and the valleys, mountaintops and valley experiences. And we think about valleys a lot of times as like the low points. But over and over again, people I was hearing were saying, yeah, but where are all the nutrients in the soil? And they're like, oh, they're in the valleys. That's where all the nutrients are. So where does the most growth take place? Well, then it's got to be where the nutrients are, which is in the valley. And that perspective of, yeah, this is a low point, but I can grow from this, or God can use this for my benefit down the road. I mean, there is a lot of truth to that. For sure, that's been in my life. I don't necessarily love the valley experiences. I don't want valley experiences, but they do force growth if we'll look at them from that perspective. Well, one, I want to ask you about is as you started to implement this, what are some tangible outcomes that you've seen happen with your staff or your students, community? If you could just speak to that for those that are listening, thinking, well, yeah, that sounds great, but were there any actual results?
When we think about fidelity of implementation, I can go around and say, hey, I see all my teachers greeting at the door. Check the boxes. I see these things happening. I know these actions are taking place. When you see true fidelity of things, you start to see the outcome. When you see culture shifts, you start to see the impact. And so, like I said, what are the impacts of just coming into the building and the feeling that you get when you're there? And I have so many teachers and parents telling me all the time what a great experience that they're having, almost like testimonials. So I really use that. I share those with my staff. I share that with the community. My child loves kindergarten. He loves his teacher. I am so happy that this is our first experience with school, and it's just been a wonderful one because of the way you guys make my child feel. Some of those things just come from, word of mouth and people sharing their experiences, but also you start to see it trickle down. So I start to see my teachers leading things, and I start to see students being empowered to lead things. So it's not just about me and my leadership and the things that I'm doing. The tangible things I can observe is when my teachers start to carry out initiatives, start to take on leadership roles, collaborating, problem solving. I feel like my teachers make my job much easier because they truly take ownership of students. They take ownership of the culture. That is where you want to get to eventually. I'm trying to do things that are sustainable. So if I were to step away, that culture would stay in place because it's managing itself. The staff are bought in. And
that's right. Well, I mean, obviously, you're a collaborative leader who is empowering your team and encouraging them to step up, giving them opportunities. And, people will do that when they feel safe, right? So this creating relationships and psychological safety is all part of this culture that can really be transformative. Is there a specific story of a teacher or a student that's really meaningful to you that your leadership has touched in a real powerful way?
So I was thinking about this question, and I was going to share a story of a student who was a lot like me, who really transformed my thinking as a teacher. And so I never taught the same after I had her in my room. But I want to shift a little bit because I want to talk about staff here. So when I first came back to Sheraton, I had left for a year to be a leadership consultant and then was called back to the principalship. And I wasn't sure. It was after COVID, and I liked wouldn't call it a break, but it was just different work that I was doing as a consultant and a different pace. But I got a call to come back to Sheraton, which was the first school that I had got my first teaching job in, and just felt called. I just felt led there and totally called there. And so it was the first week of August, and I got hired super late because they couldn't find someone. So really I had to make a split decision. And I was doing my one-on-one teacher interviews. They were super rushed because I had to get through, I wanted to get through all staff members, and I had about 2 days to do it. So I had nice little time slots, 15 minutes apiece. And the second person to come in was one of my teachers, and she instantly started crying. And of course, I'm pressed for time, and I've got to go through my 4 questions here that I have, like, what do you love about our school? All that stuff. And she begins to tell me about how she recently had lost her partner. He had died suddenly just a few weeks prior to that. So my 4 questions kind of went out the window. And I'm not a super emotional. I mean, I get emotional, but I just don't handle others' emotions super well. You know, I kind of get uncomfortable and awkward. But in that moment, I just stayed in that space with her and let her tell me what she needed to tell me. And I told her things that she needed to hear, like, it's okay. It's okay if you can't come to school the first week of school. Like, we're going to get through this together. I know you don't know me, but I'm going to prove to you that I'm going to be here to support you. You know, at the end of that conversation, it went much longer than the 15 minutes, which is fine. We just had to pivot a little bit and adjust. But at the end of that conversation, I also prayed over her. And since that time, I have prayed over her several times, and I pray over my staff, and I really try to meet them where they're at and be there for them emotionally, because that makes it a lot easier when I have to be there for that instructional part, for that accountability part, the coaching part. There's a track record of just constant support. So I can have high expectations and high accountability because I provided high support and really seeing people for who they are and what they're going through. And funny enough, 4 years later, that same teacher was one of the teachers that wrote me a letter for Principal of the Year. So
that's really beautiful, Jayme. You know, that's a beautiful story. We have this need to be known, loved, and have purpose, right? Be connected to purpose. And you've obviously demonstrated that for your staff, even though it was awkward at times, but still you took the right steps and made the right decision just to lean in for that. And the courage that you showed, she had great courage to be vulnerable with you, not even knowing you. But there's something about your presence that gave her, you know, the courage to share that. You know, I'm sure that and all these other experiences that have followed have built a team that goes to war with you, you know, when it's necessary. And I think about the battlefront, right, is helping all these children be successful, helping all these children be seen, right, be known, be loved, and educated so they can reach the potential that God has given them. So you're doing a beautiful work. Yeah.
Thank you.
I really love to hear it. If our listeners want to learn more or connect with you, I know apart from seeing you on so many podcasts, what's the best way for them to reach out and connect with you?
So I do have a website. It's just www.jaymebraida.com. Very simple. I also am on Instagram, LinkedIn, just Jayme Braida.
And you're going to release this book when? When's this book coming out?
So my goal is to have it out by the end of winter. So that probably be like March 19th.
That's real good.
I'm going to stretch it out, clear to the end of winter. Yeah, I still have some editing to do, but we'll put out my book. It's a part memoir, part leadership lessons. And I'm vulnerable in there and share my story in there if people want to know more. And then, of course, if you follow me on social media, I do a lot of just sharing my story and leadership tips. And I have a newsletter people can subscribe to, and I'll give updates on the book. So yeah, feel free to like and follow.
We'll put some links to those in the show notes as well, so that people can connect those. Well, I've really just learned a lot from this conversation. You know, your authenticity and deep care. I mean, you're obviously a strong person, right? There's so much strength and confidence. You're obviously very innovative, and just seeing that also foster the growth of the people around you is really inspiring. So I'm excited for our audience to get to learn more.
Yeah, thank you.
So if this episode spoke to you, please share it with colleagues and educators in training. And if you haven't followed us already, please follow Transformational Educators so you don't ever miss an episode. And until next time, keep leading with purpose and transforming schools into places where every person thrives.
If today's conversation gave you fresh insight or inspired you to lead with purpose, please follow the show and tell a friend. It helps us reach more educators who want to make a difference. For more stories, resources, and tools to support your leadership journey, visit graceland.edu. Until next time, keep leading with courage and care.